Ah, VHS. Look at that. It's beautiful. It's a lost art. I miss you. Kinda. Welcome, y'all. Taylor James Johnson here, and I'm absolutely loving VHS technology, an ancient form of technology that is making a comeback nowadays, and, yeah, I'm part of the problem. As you can see here, we have this beautiful relic of better times. Let's look at her innards. Ugh! What is that? It's gross. I feel like I violated it, but this is how we used to get our entertainment. I've put a few VHSs in this since, and it's destroyed them all. Look at these beautiful, beautiful things. Look at that. They're either worth nothing or worth everything. It just depends on who you are. And sometimes when the movie was really long, they'd have to put them on 2. And sometimes you can tell which ones were watched the most. Look at that, look at that, whoa! It's going green. Even the classics. Look, I have all of them! So yeah, let's take a look at what the great Chris Bumbray has to say about this ancient technology.
Here's a funny story. A few years ago in Montreal, which is the city I happen to live in, something very strange started to happen. All over the city, people began finding VHS copies of the movie Speed.
Focus, Jack! Your concern is the bus.
They would be found in mailboxes, on the metro, that's the subway for you Americans, in restaurants, left as tips. Basically, dozens of copies of Speed on VHS were floating around the city, and people loved it. Not only was it a reminder of a great movie, but people had begun to feel at this point nostalgic for VHS tapes. In the years since, this nostalgia has led on to a full-on revival, with many advocates of VHS tapes making waves, in particular directors like Quentin Tarantino and Roger Avary, who, on their Video Archives podcast, make it a point to only review films that they watch on tape or occasionally Laserdisc. So what's behind the revival of what many considered to be a dead art form? Now, nostalgia plays a big role in it, but it also follows a predictable trend where new technology comes out, is embraced quickly, and then people start to feel like they never enjoyed something quite as much as they did in their old analog forms. Consider vinyl records. For the longest time, vinyl was the only way to truly experience a new album. Sure, in the 70s there were 8-track tapes, and in the 80s we had cassettes, but neither sounded as good as vinyl. Oh, but then came compact discs, and this new digital art form made albums sound crisper than ever, with it soon becoming dominant, and eventually CDs would become extinct themselves thanks to MP3 and then streaming music. But at the same time, vinyl began a tremendous resurgence, and I'd wager that any true fan of music probably has a record player in their home. Artists regularly issue their titles on vinyl now, and even albums that never came out on vinyl during the 90s now have gotten pricey vinyl reissues. Yet, the case for VHS revival is somewhat more controversial. The fact is, VHS tapes will only ever offer compromised versions of films. The most significant limitation is that VHS tapes are analog and cropped to a 4:3 aspect ratio, meaning that most films are presented in pan and scan. For those of you who may not know what that means, it was standard practice in the 80s and 90s for studios to have technicians crop the aspect ratio in movies shot in widescreen for VHS, with them panning in an unnatural way if something important was happening in part of the frame that wasn't visible in the crop. Some movies, such as those shot in 1:8:5:1 or in Super 35, would be shown in a process called open matte, where the matte would be opened up and more of the image would be shown. This was a compromise made by directors like Stanley Kubrick, Steven Spielberg, and James Cameron, who did not want their images to have to suffer the indignity of pan and scan. Of course, at some point, VHS movies did start to be issued in the letterboxed format, where the whole frame was shown, but home viewers largely didn't care for these, as if you had a normal-sized TV, for the 80s anyway, that was about 20 inches, and half the image was cropped, well, it looked pretty bad. Some directors like Woody Allen with Manhattan or Joe Dante with Inner Space actually managed to make it so that only widescreen versions of their films were released, but it didn't last. Laserdisc, of course, was a different beast, as that played to a much more niche market. Sure, movies would be letterboxed, but a Laserdisc owner, who was probably pretty wealthy, always had a much bigger TV where the movies would look really good letterboxed. So if VHS was limited from a technical standpoint, why are people so nostalgic for it? Well, here's where it gets interesting. Tarantino, who is a surprising advocate of that technology, praises it because tapes were made by technicians scanning the 35mm prints or answer prints of the movie, rather than the negative. As such, when you saw a movie on VHS, it looked a lot more, in terms of color anyway, like what the movie looked like in its theatrical run. What Tarantino hates is that in the DVD Blu-ray era, and now with 4K, studios are going back to the original negatives of films and making them look so pristine that they actually don't look all that faithful to the way the movies were initially released. As a purist, he prefers the look of a print, which is why his movie theaters that he owns in LA, the Vista and the New Beverly, only ever show 35mm prints. He's even got a tiny little theater in the back of the Vista, which only seats about 20 people and shows VHS copies of movies and occasional 16mm prints, and is definitely a very interesting way to see movies. You never really know who you're going to see there. I was at a screening of The Adventures of Robin Hood once, and Jack Black was there. But I digress. Tarantino, of course, is a purist. He prefers the look of a print, and in fact once tried to get Sony to start a DVD label curated by him, which would present movies on DVD scanned from their original 35mm prints, cigarette burns and scratches included. The studio balked, but there's a big online community now that supports this trend, with it easy to find 35mm scans of classic films, many of which have a strikingly different look to what's available on officially licensed home media. But there's more to it than that. VHS tapes for a lot of us are relics from our respective childhoods. One of my biggest regrets is that I threw away my VHS collection many years ago. For one thing, I could have sold the tapes now, as thrift stores have found them to be a surprisingly potent market. But I also regret throwing away such precious relics, as each really told a story of its own. There was my VHS tape of Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home, which was the first one that I ever bought, and that whole Star Trek collection was really cool because the spines basically added up to a really cool illustration of the Starship Enterprise, and I had them all. Then there was my Blade Runner tape that had this weird musty smell to it that I was never able to get rid of. Then there were those cool 1992 era James Bond reissues with the covers that opened up and had stills and factoids about the movie in there. There was also my copy of Wayne's World, which was bent to shit because, well, one day my dog took a nap on the empty box. Or there was the VHS copy of Over the Top that I borrowed from a friend but never returned because we had a huge fight and I started dodging his phone calls. So I get people buying tapes, and each really does tell a story of its own. The same thing goes for vinyl albums. That said, I would always say that vinyl sounds better than CDs or MP3s, but VHS? Sorry, but no. However, I am old school in the way that I would rather see a battered 35mm print of something like The Last Starfighter at Tarantino's New Beverly Cinema in LA, which I actually did a couple of months ago, than watch a pristine 4K DCP of the same movie or a 4K physical release or streaming version. But hey, that's just me. Let us know in the comments what you think. Do you still collect VHS tapes? Are you a Laserdisc person? Do you not like DVDs or other physical media? And what are your thoughts on streaming? Let us know in the comments because we're curious to hear.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. Joe Blow was created by movie fans for movie fans, and we appreciate your support.